Welcome back, everyone. You're watching We Heart Therapy, the special series EFT Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Bell, aka Annabelle Bourque, licensed marriage and family therapist here in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm super excited. I have Kelly Bourque. She is one of our EFT supervisors. She runs the Red Therapy Group. She's in Nashville, Tennessee. And she's an amazing EFT supervisor, certified EFT supervisor and therapist. And she specializes in intensives and she leads some trainings. She has some great seminars for therapists. So I'm super excited to have her with us today. And I just realized my computer's unplugged. So you're all listening to my podcast. Hopefully we don't die in the middle. So, and hey, if you're watching this, and you haven't checked out my book, remember, I have my EFT book available on Amazon, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, working with challenging and difficult clients, or connecting with challenging and difficult clients. Just type in Amazon, Relentless Empathy and Annabelle Bourque, and you'll find it. And Sue Johnson endorsed it. So it's really awesome. And I'm sure you'll love it. So we're excited today. We're going to be talking about how to do intensive therapy. And both Kelly and I do intensives. I'm in Las Vegas. She's in Nashville. And, we have a couple EFT trainers also in between our geographic areas that also offer them. So I think between all of us, we cover a really wide span. But we're going to talk to you guys about intensives, sort of what they are, why you would go to them. And number one question I get when people contact me about intensives is, what is an intensive? How is that different from regular therapy? So Kelly, how would you like to start us off and just sort of like give everyone an introduction to what intensives are? And I'm going to plug in while we do that.
Yeah. Okay. You do that. And I just want to say thank you for offering this. Really, I think I've told you this a million times, but I send supervisees to your podcast all the time. It's such an amazing free resource. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for this conversation. I've been looking forward to talking about intensives specifically. And to answer that question, and this is a question I get as well, what's the difference between doing an EFT intensive and just doing regularly, maybe hourly, weekly, kind of more traditional weekly therapy? Mm-hmm. And really the main difference from my perspective, now different models, and you'll hear different people talk about intensives in different ways, mm-hmm. but for our sort of working definition, an EFT intensive is essentially using EFT in a condensed amount of time. Mm-hmm. So the way that we do it is we do it over 3 days. You'll see different trainers do it, maybe less or more time.
It could be 2 days.
Right.
It could be more.
Right. It could be 5. But really, it's the same process. It's the same model. It's the tango. It's nothing different as far as the work itself. Mm-hmm. But the difference is you're doing it in a very short amount of time. So I like to think of it as like a jump start to the work. This is not a magic fix. The expectation is not you go do an intensive for 3 days, everything's solved, you've got a secure bond. Mm-hmm. That's not it. But there is something really special, and we can talk about that more. Maybe the felt.
Let me just jump in with you really fast. So we're just putting this out there for everyone. So basically, Kelly, what you're describing is, so instead of like a couple coming in for traditional, let's say weekly, once a week, hour-long sessions, a couple would be coming for one-time therapy that might be over 2 days, 3 days, depending on who's offering it. But typically it's around 2 or 3 days. And then when they're done with that work, they would be either, going back to their normal lives. Maybe they'd be getting a referral to continue their work with a therapist at home. Some clients already have therapists that they're working with, but, maybe they feel like they're not getting leverage enough. So, they may come do an intensive to help create some traction on some stuck spots and then return back to their traditional ongoing therapy. But So why would what would be the benefits, I guess, for a couple to do just this one time intensive therapy? And these are like full long days, right? They could be 6 to 8 hours, depending on the couple's tolerance, like their bandwidth to be able to do the heavy, deep work. But why would a couple want to do an intensive versus traditional therapy, let's just say, or traditional sessions?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that's really important to think through for assessment. And so both for the couple and for the therapist, right? So the reason, might not actually match what an intensive is designed for.
Mm-hmm.
And so for couples that really just for convenience, like the hour a week thing is not cutting it, like it's just hard with childcare and jobs, an intensive is a really wonderful way to, for some couples, it's just actually easier to think of it as like a retreat or a getaway. Like it's actually easier to get childcare for 3 days in a row or taking advantage of, maybe a bank holiday or something like that, and kind of knock out a big chunk of work in 3 days or 4 days.
Yeah.
So
This could be like the equivocal of like 3 or 4 months of therapy, like all into. It's funny because I was explaining to some of my supervisees, I was like, it's kind of like fostering a puppy, and then you have to give it back.
Yeah. And it depends, different therapists. I've got therapists on my team that do intensives, and if the couple is local, they will also do the follow-up work.
Mm-hmm.
So they love getting, a big chunk of work done right off the bat in the beginning, kind of really, maybe partially or even fully de-escalating the cycle, and then trying to do the follow-up work from translating that into real life, and then eventually stage 2 work. So that's a lovely way to kind of approach the beginning of therapy.
Yeah. And let me just kind of jump in with you too. So I'm just thinking about, what if a couple or somebody's watching this and they don't really know, they're looking into therapy for the first time. Maybe they don't even know a whole lot about EFT. But they're looking at, what might be the benefits of attending an intensive, as opposed to regular online therapy. Traditional therapy. You could do both. But so somebody just generally looking into therapy, what would you sort of tell folks as to what some of the pros or the benefits would be of doing an intensive?
Right. And that's something that we do talk about in the consult. I really recommend, if you're thinking about doing intensives as a therapist, have a pretty thorough screening process. But for the clients out there saying, I don't know anything, right? Like, I don't know what EFT is. I don't know, why an intensive, why weekly. I would say that the benefits to doing an intensive is we get to stay warm. So and that means traction and momentum. There's something really powerful about that. Instead of waiting a week, you're just waiting hours or maybe overnight, and we'll see you the next morning. That's really special, important. The other benefit is there is something very bonding about the intensive bubble, is what I call it. And so it's almost like going on vacation. There's a lot of, there's a lot at stake, right? So that it's kind of like, this is a big investment in both time and money. And so that kind of raises that energy level. But that can actually work to your advantage as well.
Yeah.
It's extremely bonding.
Like I said, fostering a puppy, and then it's like, then you have to give it back, and you're like, oh, but I love it. I want to stay with it.
I know there's an attachment formed during that process. So that's really special. And then I would say, the cons of an intensive versus weekly is it's not real life. And so the translating it to your real life is really important. That's why I really encourage follow-up work to be a part of the conversation from the get-go.
Yeah, because the benefits of the weekly ongoing sessions is it can really track how you guys are maintaining the work over time, versus like intensives kind of help you get in. You can sort of like dislodge some things if you have been in therapy before, but it feels like it's kind of stalling, or maybe you've kind of hit a hill and you just need to overcome this part in order to get to some more momentum to continue work. Or, maybe you're somebody who has a busy lifestyle and can't commit to regular sessions, but, maybe there's some brushing up to do, on the connection, or maybe there's like a crisis, that might need handling that, again, it's not necessarily an intensive may not be suitable to all situations, and we'll get to that, but certainly, we can help sort of address some short-term things. But, I like what you said is we can't solve everything in an intensive, especially if a couple's been married years and years and years, it's like we sort of have to figure out what is the most prominent, what's the biggest thing that needs to be worked on, and work on that rather than trying to solve everything, because we literally cannot solve everything.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Adjusting the expectations, so important.
Yeah. Yeah. So if a couple was, or even a therapist was thinking about recommending their couple for this, what kinds of situations would you say it may not be appropriate for an intensive?
Yeah, that's a really important question and thing to consider. Anything that would not be appropriate for couples work obviously is also not appropriate for intensive couples work. So if one partner is more out than in, I say the intensive is not a good place to figure out if you want to be in the relationship. Ideally, we want that couple to really know we do want to work towards a new relationship together. That's, an agreement then, but it's like, we're so stuck, right? Like we don't have the relationship that we want, and we don't know how to get there. We're really stuck. Then an intensive is amazing for that. So really having the same goals for therapy, that's true for couples therapy hourly. And it's even more so true for intensives. Because you're committing to 3 days, so you don't have the benefit of the like incremental assessment sessions, right? It's like you're here, you're committed. So want to really make sure that your relationship is the right fit before actually traveling, setting out 3 days, like that kind of thing. So having the same goals is really important. And then, other things that would not be good for traditional couples work also are not good for intensive: active ongoing affair, active addiction, active interpersonal violence. These are all things that really need to be carefully and thoroughly assessed before committing.
Probably also for the person who's doing the intensives, like, we have Jim Thomas in Denver, specializes in addiction. That's his wheelhouse. And that's, and a lot of his work is really about stuck spots around addiction. But again, it really sort of depends if somebody, is gone through like treatment program, they're an outpatient, and they may be sober, but they're still struggling with sobriety, with recovery. Versus like somebody who just relapsed yesterday, And I like what you said, sort of about the different agendas, and, I understand like some couples aren't sure, like, hey, if these things that are going on in our relationship don't change, then yeah, I probably can't stay. But, I think what we really mean by different agendas, and you correct me if I'm off, is sometimes people come in and their intention is they are really out and they don't know how to say out, and their intention is sort of drop off their partner in therapy and sort of leave them with the babysitter kind of in a way, as help them recover as they take off, whereas the other partner may think, hey, we're agreeing to couples therapy. That means you're going to work on it with me. And, that would be, maybe one of those situations where let's be clear if we're both at least committed to like working on seeing if the relationship could be different, versus one of us is definitely here to fire the relationship where the other one is still wanting to maintain it, would be important. And if there's like physical abuse that's happening, where, we're trying to, obviously we're going to be getting deep and vulnerable in this. And if we can't, keep people safe, if they're going to go home and get kind of physically assaulted because of the things going on in session, that's not necessarily, a safe situation. But again, we also have some therapists, like in Belgium that specialize in doing work on violence. But again, like a therapist that's not highly trained in that, we wouldn't want to send you to, we want to be ethical and do our due diligence, you don't want to send, somebody to their general MD when they need an optometrist, so we really,
I think, you're speaking to the nuance, right? This is so nuanced, and there's a spectrum with all those things I talked about. There's a spectrum, and it takes clinical judgment just to sort of assess in real time during that consult. And then the other thing, I like what you were saying, Annabelle, about the different agendas, kind of like riffing off of that. I was thinking ambivalence is okay. It really is. I mean, a lot of couples come into intensives with true ambivalence, but it's true ambivalence, right? It's neither out or
not committed to being out. And
there's a real like,
I'm stuck and I'm neither here, I'm neither there. Yeah.
Can't see past this, right? I don't even have a vision of what this could look like. And so, we know that the attachment longings are deep within us, right? And sometimes those are so clouded that we don't even have access to that. It's like just the stuckness is what's right in front of us.
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful work to be able to wake up those longings and like, oh yeah. I'm here for a reason. Yeah.
And, we that's some of the beautiful things we can tap into when you have the intensives is because we can go deeper a little bit faster, and so that's a really amazing benefit. And I'm thinking too, like with the affairs thing, again, I'm sure you've worked with couples, and certainly I have, where they discovered, it was sort of came to light that one of the partners was having an affair. Now the marriage is thrust into crisis.
Right.
But the affair has ended. It's not, somebody's coming to therapy and they're still like entertaining the affair. They're still engaging with that person, but they're coming to therapy. I've had requests for people to come with their affair partner, and I'm like, no, not appropriate. So, there are some really good benefits. And again, but we want to be very clear that when you come for an intensive, again, we want to align those expectations that we can't solve everything in these 2 days, but we can really help dislodge some really entrenched stuck spots, get some traction, get some momentum, help maybe move out of like immediate crisis mode. There's a lot of factors. So assessment is really important. And I think when you're speaking with a therapist about doing an intensive, making sure that they are clear about their expectations and that you're sort of clear, if you're somebody who's interested in receiving one, what it is that you're sort of hoping to achieve, or what outcome you may be looking for. That way the therapist can really respond and decide, hey, is your expectation or goals in alignment with what can actually happen, what's reasonable, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it's just a brief discussion and, everybody kind of consents. And again, it is intensive work. You're coming in, 6 hours of therapy, 2-3 days in a row is a lot. But again, you might be someone who just doesn't have the time in your schedule to do regular ongoing sessions. It's really amazing. It really is an amazing immersive experience. And, what are some of the, maybe the transformations you've witnessed during intensives?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. It takes me to I can picture moments, right? Like on my couch. And I'm sure, for people who are listening that are therapists, you have these moments too in your weekly work. But just moments of beautiful clarity where the partners are looking at each other as if for the first time. And it's something about seeing each other more accurately that physically draws them closer. I'm picturing like a slow tear down the cheek. I'm picturing, like an enactment with a slow reach of the hand. There's like tentativeness, and then there's something really sacred and new. Something else I wanted to add, I was thinking about this as you were talking. This is an excellent opportunity for EFT therapists to bring their own relationship to therapy. I actually went to an intensive. I was a new supervisor in training, and I could not go to anybody in my area because I knew everybody, and I didn't feel safe enough to go to someone with less experience than me. It was life-changing. And it also helped me. I didn't go for, intensive training, but it helped me as a therapist as well. And so that's something I kind of want to throw out there for the EFT therapist listeners, that this might be a beautiful way to actually experience EFT, whether you're in crisis or not. Let's say that you're in a pretty good spot. But just to really feel the level of depth of experiencing and that those bonding moments, and what it's like to trust a therapist with your relationship, that's a big deal.
Yes.
Right?
Especially as a fellow therapist, it's such a vulnerable situation. And this is the really funny part, is being a therapist who's been in therapy before, my gosh, is the therapist judging what's wrong with you? Because, which of course they're not, but, being the therapist who also sees a lot of therapists in my practice, it's just as vulnerable because they've been to the circus and they've seen all the strings too. So they're like, you totally suck, or, oh, wow, that was good, so, it's vulnerable on both ends. So really being able to sort of let go and just put ourselves into the process and go through. And I could really hear in your voice, how much that experience really touched you for the better and how amazing it was. And it really is. I mean, even if you're the one going through the intensive or you're the therapist doing the intensives, I've worked with veterans, I've worked with, folks from all walks of life, but, some really special, cases. I've had couples come in, I'll never forget, with some struggling with some addictions and some PTSD. And, it just became such a block. And, what we were able to do was really unearth, really get to the core of what was really driving all of this. And there was some big releases in my office, and, the people that they walked in as were not the same people that they left my office as. And it was so cool. And, it was very clear, their work was just beginning. If they were going to, be able to continue to heal from what we uncovered, they definitely needed ongoing sessions. But we definitely unearthed a massive boulder, and just all the stuff that came out of that was so amazing and transformational. And I just feel super blessed when I get to work with couples doing intensives, and it's really amazing. And so, so I'm thinking, Kelly, I know that you train therapists to do this also. So whether you're a couple or you're a therapist wanting to do intensives, one of my first thoughts was, okay, so if I want to be a therapist who offers intensives, or I want to go through an intensive, what's the pacing kind of like? Yeah, we know it's intensive for 2 or 3 days, but what is the pacing like during those actual sessions?
Oh, thank you for asking that. This is like the huge learning curve. Okay. So, when you, as a therapist, are doing an intensive, it's intimidating. There's no way around it. It's intimidating. It's high stakes. Couples have very high expectations for the intensive, and you can't undo that. As much as you inform consent, all the things in the beginning, it just is. They're kind of like putting their eggs in this intensive basket. And so you're going to feel that level of anxiety and sort of expectation. And what does that make you want to do? It makes you want to make something happen, right? Like, I better make something happen. And what is true for all EFT work, it's also true for intensive work. But I'm here to say that the temptation to make something happen is much higher in an intensive. And so it's really important to stick with the tango, go slow, don't get ahead of your clients. Even if they are saying, we want to go over here, let's go faster.
You don't feel pressured for the outcome.
No.
It's really about that process,
It really is. And there's no, better way to say it than trust the process. Although I know that's, it gets annoying after time. It's like, oh,
almost cliche.
Yes.
Cliche, trust the process. What does that mean?
Yeah, but really, really, check yourself, right? And go slow. Go back to the tango. I like having EFT buddies in the wings. Mm-hmm. So if I'm feeling something like, overwhelmed or whatever, I can just call and just hear myself talk, right? And it's like, the answer is always, going back to the tango and what's the block, and like just getting really sort of granular with the micro moves, just all the stuff that works. It's just really important to ground yourself in that.
Yeah. Well, and also, it can feel kind of intimidating, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do for that many days? So many hours all at once, especially if you're someone who's used to only doing kind of like sprints, 1 hour, like I do 1 hour sessions a week. And that was sort of like some of my initial feelings when I started doing them. And then I realized once you start doing them, there's so much to accomplish, and you're sort of getting in there and figuring out, what brings them in. Is this an attachment injury? So we got to do work around an attachment injury. Is this just the cycle is deeply entrenched? So we're really like carving out the cycle. It's really like all that you would be doing, from the beginning of therapy with them, you're just fast tracking it, and I'm thinking too, along with process comes structure. And I found having a structure of some sort kind of helps with the process, especially, I have ADHD and, so people are like, how on earth do you do those? And, EFT helps me stay in my body, which EFT or ADHD, we're not very good at living in our body. But, I found that having a structure, like sort of, I am a good sprinter. So we set up I set up my intensives as like little mini sprints, as if it was a session. So let's do like 75 minutes, an hour, or 90 minutes, take a break. Everyone needs to stretch, get something to drink, go to the bathroom, come back. It's like another session.
I love your frame. I think that's exactly right. It's whatever you have to tell yourself to get yourself into yeah. And you already know how to do those little mini sprints. And so it's just kind of putting them together in a day. And those breaks are so important. I never do more than 2 hours at a time. I don't think any relationship has a window of tolerance that's beyond 2 hours. I don't have a window of tolerance, for that.
Without taking a break.
Kind of focus. Yeah, you need a break. So yeah, I really love the way that you frame that. I think that's helpful just for us to think about, like, how do we translate the hourly to now, like, stretched out between 2, 3, 4 days. Yeah.
Yeah. Now here's a good question. So, I have couples that kind of can feel awkward sometimes. So let's say it's the first day, first half, we're doing 3 hours in the morning, like 2 sets of 90 minutes, break in between, and then taking lunch. but let's just say they're really escalated and it got hot in session. And now they got to go to lunch and they're like, do we go together? Should we take separate cars? Because now I have to eat with this person that I just got yelled at by. Like, what do you do for those instances with couples?
I mean, I really don't like to prescribe anything, and I want to give couples all the freedom to do what feels right for them in the moment. And so, if they feel the need to separate, and then that's totally fine and understandable. But if they feel the need to continue the conversation and eat lunch together, also fine and understand. Whatever happens is data, right? So when we come back together, I'll be here. We'll slow it down. Same thing for when you go home or to your Airbnb at night.
Yeah.
Right. Like whatever you choose to do with that. I don't really like prescribing homework. And, I
not even homework per se, but like, how do we get through the next hour? It's like, this is awkward. And, again, I'm kind of the same thing. And I think normalizing it too. You're going to come back in an hour, however long we break for lunch. I'm not going to leave you hanging out there with this, but it is hard. Like we just got somewhere deep. We stirred the pot, everything's alive. And now you got to go and have hamburgers with this person. It's like,
I know. And I think that's another benefit of the intensive is I'm right here and it's not long before we get to unpack this, slow this down. It was pretty fresh. So let's go back. And let's get really curious.
I tell my couples sort of think of it as like a moment of self-care because we are doing intensive work. And yes, it just got hot, but you guys need to eat. You need to keep yourself hydrated so that you have the energy to come back in here. So if that's all you think about is, we're just going to take care of our energy levels and make sure we have what we need. Our body has nourishment and, a few moments of rest where we can kind of come back up to the surface and calm a little bit. We're just prepping to go back in, just taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And this, that makes me think there's room for creativity.
Yes.
And so I know lots of different intensive therapists around the EFT intensive therapists around the country who have their little like beautiful spins on it. Like, Kenny Sandifer, who's also here in Tennessee, he does equine therapy. Mm-hmm. So he incorporates that within the intensive and it's amazing. That's not something most of us can do because we don't have that skill set and training. I've got
I don't have a farm. I had horses as a kid, but I don't live on a farm. I'm in Vegas.
Exactly. I can think of another one who incorporates yoga. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just beautiful. So I think there's really room for beautiful creativity within this too.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I'm sure somebody's asking, yeah, but what does this cost? And I know like therapists get kind of bajiggity. I think most people do talking about money. That's one of those things that's iffy in society. And, also something we work on in relationships, financial intimacy. But, so again, we have sort of touched on this a little bit, that there is a financial investment, because again, you're condensing 3 to 4 months of therapy into like a weekend or an intensive couple of days. So, this isn't like you're going to pay for one session of therapy and that cover the whole thing. So how do you sort of address that?
Right. So, in talking, I'm thinking, we've got two audiences, right? We've got the therapists who are thinking about doing intensives and how do I price this? And that's a big deal. And I get that. And then we've got the couples who are thinking like, what should I expect? And why is there a difference in cost? Typically, intensives are more expensive than hourly therapy. And an intensive, I like to think of it, it's an experience. And the way that I do intensives is I block off my 3 days. I'm not doing anything else.
It means canceling all of our other clients and being available 100% for you.
Yes. And there's flexibility in the schedule. So I'm really prioritizing the work, right? So that might take, I don't know exactly how long, I've got like a schedule, but there's within that schedule, let's say I have a 2-hour block and we get to a really good place in 90 minutes. Well, I'm not going to just eat up the time because it's there. We need to stop there and pause, let your whole body integrate this. This is better for you to do the break. And it might be that your assessment ran a little long. That's okay too. Like there's just flexibility. And I'm more tuning into the need of your relationship than the hour, or I don't have anybody waiting on me, so I think that's a really wonderful thing for the experience of the intensive, both for the therapist and for the client. And so because we're blocking off and we're sort of on call, not in the on call, like someone can just call you and you're like,
yeah, at midnight. Sure.
No, nothing like that. But that
we are available like too. And sometimes that could also mean, if you're doing like a weekend intensive and maybe we don't normally work weekends, we're also blocking time out from time with our own families,
right,
to be available for this process, know. So we're really like, you're asking us to cut off all aspects of our life for just that time for you. And and I think too, with the cost thing, it also depends on the other things that come with the experience that you might be looking for. I mean, it could range from just a few $1,000s to over $10,000, if you want to go somewhere like in a foreign country and it includes like hotel room and breakfast and, like that movie Couples Retreat, which is really awesome, or, if you ever, I love the movie Hope Springs with Steve Carell, and it's got Tommy Lee Jones and Meryl Streep. They play a fantastic married couple and they go to a marriage.
Write that down. I don't know that.
Yeah. Hope Springs. And you know what? Steve Carell is typecasted as a comedic actor. He is fantastic as a therapist. I thought he did so well. It's one of my favorite movies. And they go to Maine to do, well, it's set in Maine, but it's actually Connecticut that they end up going to, just because I know this corny movie facts, but it's really cool and beautiful. And they go and now their therapist does just morning sessions. And I think they did like 3 morning sessions. And so again, every therapist, their structure is kind of different, depends on where you're going, what kind of amenities they offer, like equine therapy, might be a little bit more involved. There's a lot of costs with upkeeping with the animals and stuff, liability is higher, again, it just sort of depends. So I think it's important to just be prepared again, that it is whatever, and usually when you're going to this, hopefully you're looking for a good experienced therapist who's highly trained. So, you're also paying for their own, they're investing their own time and energy into continuing to keep themselves trained and to attend seminars and do mentorship and supervision so they can stay top of the field, top of their game and be the best they can be for you. So you're paying for skills and expertise as well. So again, if you're going to a super highly trained, highly skilled therapist, and so I think when you're shopping for an intensive, just be prepared. Again, I've never seen a therapist for less than a few $1,000s. So it really depends. But just ask, it's okay to ask, hey, what is this going to cost me? Some therapists may offer, they do deposits, some may do plans, some don't, just sort of ask. What does it all include, and just be upfront. I think that's really best.
No, I agree 100%. And hopefully a good website should have a lot of that information very clearly. And if it's not, there should be a good contact to just, ask those questions directly. And then if you're still unsure during the consult, make sure you get those questions answered for sure.
And so if you're an EFT therapist who's saying, hey, I might like to try my hand at doing intensives, like how did you even get started? Like what's kind of the process? I mean, I know how I started, but what did you do?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's been so long. So I learned a lot, trial and error. I really learned a lot by failing. And I've actually created a course because of that. And because so many people reached out to me and said, how I want to do intensives. How do you, can I pick your brain? And I thought, we just need to put this in one place, make it easy for everybody. But yeah, I started 8 or 9 years ago doing intensives. And in the beginning, I was trickling it in with my hourly caseload. And then eventually, I gradually, went to where I am now, where I'm only doing intensives. And I have a team of therapists that also do intensives. So we work together really well. We're always trying to fine tune the experience all the way from inquiry to follow-up work. I mean, there's a lot to it, and we want it to be the best experience for the client, where everything is very clear, very explicit. Nobody's questioning what's happening. Why are we doing what we're doing? None of that. It's very clearly laid out. So I'm proud of that. And it feels, it feels really special. But I will say, going back to the beginning, it was like I learned the hard way. There were some things that are in the course that I say, don't do this. And, that came from experience.
Mm-hmm. So you just sort of decided to kind of try your hand at it, and then just through the process, starting just one couple at a time, and again, everyone's got to find their flow, find their niche with it. Everyone's got their vibe that they do it. And I think that's, as with regular therapy, you're just going to have to find that. I know for me, I saw these movies when I was going through grad school, and I was like, oh, I really want to do that. I really want to do intensive. So I became passionate about it. I think every therapist starts out with regular ongoing sessions, and I've just become so busy that, it really helps me and my schedule better to do the intensives, and they're just so enriching, and I love them. But I remember it started with me, my mentors were doing intensive. So I had a few couples that, were interested. So we got to collaborate, where I was able to bring my mentor in to run the intensive. And I basically gave my time for free to go through it with them, to really study my mentor, to learn how to do it, and sort of learn by going through it. And it's intense, but it's good. It's amazing.
Well, and I love, that's such a rich learning. I wish I could have done that. Like, that's a very rich learning, where you're not just kind of thrown into the deep end. Like, you get to watch it and then like slowly ease your way. One idea.
My first intensives did not look like what my mentor's intensives look like.
I mean, they never do.
They did it, and they never do it. And then again, trial and error.
I know. It kind of has to be that way. Yeah, you're right. Something to think about for those EFT therapists listening is, one great way to get your feet wet is just do it with one of your clients you have currently first. It's like, I want to try this thing. I think you'd be the perfect candidate. What do you think about not just taking a couple days and doing a chunk of our work, continuing the work, right? And that's a nice way, because you've already got that trust and that alliance. And it's not as intimidating as with starting with someone who, is brand new, doesn't know you.
Yeah, that's a really good idea to start. And so I'm thinking, okay, so if you're somebody who's looking for a therapist to do intensives, like, how do you even go about finding a therapist who will do an intensive?
I mean, most people who find us, it's a Google search, right? So, get really specific. If you know that you want EFT, I would include that in your search, EFT intensive. You're probably going to, narrow it down to, I don't know, more than a few therapists, and then you'll want to kind of look at, is there a particular area of the country that you want to go to? Do you want to be local? If you want to be local, there's more likely a chance that you could have that therapist as your follow-up therapist. That's a question to ask. And I think really just kind of going to those websites and get a feel. Do you like the vibe? Do you like some of the sites have videos, right? And so, that's how I would know. That's kind of what I would do if I I mean, we have an advantage, right? Because we are therapists. So I think someone who's like, doesn't know where to start. Of course, we're biased toward EFT. So I would really strongly
The
suggest.
gold standard of couples counseling. Why would you want to go anywhere else? Like, I want to go to someone who knows what they're doing and is using a method that is proven to work. That's why we do EFT.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
Never had bad therapy. That's exactly why I became EFT therapist, because we wanted a model that actually showed that it can do what it says it can do. And we got highly trained in it. So, because we don't want to give our clients bad therapy.
Yeah. So if you are looking for someone who's doing EFT, you might look for, are they certified? What level of training do they have? I mean, that's something to think about. And then, and then beyond that, I think it's maybe more about preference.
Yeah. I like that. So sort of like maybe what the specialty is according to what your particular set of circumstances might be, like what you said, maybe you want to go local, maybe you don't want to go local and you want to get, the heck out of Dodge. You want to like a vacation kind of experience, an opportunity to travel, or you just want to go where no one's going to know you, maybe you lived in a small area. So, and it could be, your budget and, all kinds of factors. So definitely a Google search is a good way. And so, okay, so we're going to wind this down. So you also offer a training course that you so wonderfully put together for therapists who want to do intensives to learn how to do them. And where can they find your course?
Yeah. So the easiest way to remember this is redtherapygroup.com. Red, like both Annabelle and my hair color.
Yeah.
So
therapygroup.com. And if people like want to come to Nashville and do an intensive, is that the same website if you're a client or a therapist?
Yes, there's another site. It links to this site. But first, the Red Therapy Group, there's a for therapist tab or page. And then there's a drop down and you'll find all kinds of good stuff. But one of them is the EFT intensive e-course. So that's that. And then the other, and on that same site, you can find your way to this site, which is the EFTmarriageintensive.com. And that is if you're looking to go and have an intensive, if you want to take your relationship to an intensive and have that experience, that's where you do that.
Awesome. So therapists, they can go to redtherapygroup.com. And then there's a link to find your course. And now, like, how long is the course? It's a learn at your own pace kind of thing.
Right.
Like multiple hours,
3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 3 hours. And it also comes with a download of sample template paperwork.
Perfect. That's wonderful. So I love that. So Red Therapy Group. So if you're interested in learning how to do intensives, therapies, Kelly's site is a wonderful, wonderful resource for therapists learning how to do this. Definitely, it can help you feel a little bit better about jumping into that process, and you can learn the benefit of her wisdom. And then if you are a couple who's looking to find a therapist to do an intensive with, you can find Kelly with her website. I'm going to put a link in the description for this video. If you're listening on podcast, you may just have to rewind and write it down again. You can also find me in Las Vegas, drbell.com, or Las Vegas Marriage Counseling. And as well, we have some wonderful EFT therapists across the country, some of our mentors who are EFT trainers who do them. And again, just sort of depending on, if you want to go to the mountains, if you want to go to if you want to go, Serenity, if you want to be on on horseback, it just sort of depends. There's a wide spread.
I was going to say, I think you and I both have hearts aligned in really helping couples get what they need. And so, regardless, reach out to one of us. And even if we're referring elsewhere, like we have a lot of connections, we can help you get connected for sure. And then the EFT intensive e-course, I also have a 15-minute update video included where it's all the things I learned from recording the course, because it's we're constantly evolving and fine tuning this. And so make sure you watch the update version if you do purchase the course.
Yes, that's wonderful. Just really, I love that you're just really staying ahead of that growth and evolving and just keeping everyone up to date on what you learn. That's amazing. So,
Thank you.
yeah, and thank you so much for being on. And I hope if you're watching this, that you really found this of value. And again, if you're a therapist, again, like it's an amazing resource because, when like we talked about earlier, when I started doing intensives, there weren't any courses or anything available. And I, certainly was like, somebody needs to teach a course on this. And then Kelly developed a course. I was like, thank goodness Kelly developed a course on this. So if you're, wanting to do this, you too can do it and you can be great at it, but you do have to, get trained, work on it, work on your process, and it can be great. And if you're a couple, these intensives really are amazing and they can be really refreshing. They can help you guys kind of get unstuck. They can dislodge. They really are amazing and beneficial. And, so we're hoping if you're watching this, that it might inspire you to really go out and really think about doing an intensive or to, contact either one of us or another one of our colleagues and sign up for an intensive. So we're super excited that you guys joined us. And again, I'm going to make sure that I put links to Kelly's websites in the description for this video. And so that way you can just click right on it. Thank you again, Kelly, so much for being with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And if EFT therapists just have other questions for you, you offer a lot of cool things. You have your Superpower Alliance teaching about sort of the business aspect of therapy, also very important. Is that also just the same Red Therapy group and your email address is on there?
My email address is not on there, but Superpower Alliance, Superpower Plus, which is the $10 webinars, all of that good stuff is under the For Therapists tab on the Red Therapy group site. But yeah, I'm happy to also, you can email info@redtherapygroup.com and that will find its way to me. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions. Really happy to do that.
Perfect. So you can email Kelly at info@redtherapygroup.com and she'd be happy to answer any of your questions. And as well, a lot of you have been really great at getting in touch with me. Again, drbell.com. Hello, drbell@gmail.com. Or, you can also visit my couple's website, lasvegastherapy.com. And We Heart Therapy, my podcast. And now it's its own website and we're doing retreats and conferences and seminars for therapists and soon to be couples as well. So stay tuned and you can visit wehearttherapy.com as well. But hey, if you're watching and you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure that you do hit subscribe now because more videos are on the way. Don't forget to buy my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients for Helping Professionals, available on Amazon or on my website, www.drbugatti.com.